Please call the roll.
Winters.
Here.
Dowling.
Here.
Swallow. Here. Martin.
Here.
Bowman.
Here.
Stilling.
Here.
Beer. Here. Brooks.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. Item 4 is discussion and action on the consent agenda. All of the following items which concern reports and items of a routine nature normally approved at City Council meetings will be approved by one vote of the council. Any member of the council desiring to discuss an item on the consent agenda may request that it be removed from the consent agenda and placed for discussion as the next item on the regular agenda. It will then be considered separately. The consent agenda consists of the consideration and action on the following items. Item A, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting November 15th, 2021. Item B, approval of the minutes of the emergency meeting held December 1st, 2021. And item C, approval of claims in the amount of $556,077.73 and payroll expenses of $282,416.19. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Have a motion by Mr. Winters and a second by Mrs. Beer to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Please call the vote.
Winters.
Yes.
Beer. Yes. Stelling.
Yes.
Bowman.
Yes.
Dowling.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Swallow. Yes. Brooks.
Yes.
Item 6, reports. First item is a Tourism Tax Committee meeting held on November 17th, 2021. Mr. Martin.
It was a pretty quick meeting. We had one item, the Alva bull battle. I don't have the amount that we approved in front of me. I apologize for that. We didn't approve the full amount. We did approve it. He made a few changes to it, but otherwise pretty routine. It's been in Alba for a long time, and it's a growing event, and so heard his explanation of everything and approved it.
Does the council have any questions for Connor? Thank you. Item B is a Sanitation Committee meeting held on November 23rd, 2021. Mr. Stelling.
No, I was absent.
You were absent. Was that before Thanksgiving? Troy,
Yeah, I was there, if that was the one that was canceled. We just talked about the poly carts again, the chassis, or whether or not to buy the chassis.
I believe we were doing some research to determine what it would cost to potentially purchase a new truck. We did do some more conversation on poly carts and what was the appropriate plan of action, whether we move forward with potentially buying new poly carts and finishing that project, or moving forward with a new garbage truck. And we are supposed to come back to the next Sanitation Committee meeting with quotes on some different options for garbage trucks, whether they be new, used, leasing options as well.
does the council have any questions? All right, thank you. Item C is the Alba Hospital Authority meeting on November 23rd, 2021 and November 29th, 2021 and December 3rd, 2021. Mr. Bowman.
Well, believe it or not, the hospital authority meeting, as far as financials, was very routine. The biggest part of all three of those meetings was on the vaccination mandate. Was voted in, voted out, and that's pretty much where it stands. But there was no issues with the hospital other than that. Everything was going well.
Any questions for Mr. Bowman? Thank you, Greg. Next item is a special Alva Planning Commission meeting held on November 29th, 2021. The commission considered the rezoning of property that is residential to commercial general and denied that request. I heard reports from the new city code enforcement officer, which I don't think, have we announced that here yet? It's Adam Grimsley is the new code enforcement officer, and don't recall any other
That was all.
business. Okay. Any questions regarding the planning commission meeting?
Was that where they talked about Tom Strikes? Was that?
Yes.
And that was what was turned down?
Yes.
Because I was under the impression that was going to come back to the city council so we could vote on that when we voted the other one down.
Planning commission, when they vote to change an ordinance, then it comes to city council. If they don't take action to change an ordinance, it doesn't come back to city council. Item E is street and alley committee meeting held on November 30th, 2021.
I believe we canceled
I
that.
think we did cancel that meeting. So item F
It was
is
during the water leak, we did cancel
Yep, okay. Item F is Park and Building Committee meeting held on December 2nd, 2021.
There was really only two things that was discussed that day. A possible tenant in the professional building. Those discussions are ongoing as there's going to be some remodeling versus lease term, so to speak, and those discussions going on. The rest of the meeting basically had to do with the pool committee and what they have going at that time, and Ms. Kay may have to help me here. There were 6 proposals for firms that would like to take on the project. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to make them, well, 5. Haven't been able to make a meeting because I've been out of town, and that's where it stood. So they'll be picking 2, 3, and then from there we'll start seeing some designs. So
And I think Dr. Decker has an update.
Dr. Decker, would you like to give us an update?
Sure. So over the last month, I'll just kind of give you a rundown. The Pool Advisory Committee continues to meet weekly on Thursday evenings here in council chambers. We had a public input meeting on November 18th at Northwest Technology Center. 26 members of the community attended. We did receive some very good input from attendees. We received qualification packets from 5 architectural and engineering firms. Committee members reviewed those. We narrowed the list to the top 3 for us to interview. 2 interviews were held last Thursday, December 16th. The 3rd firm will be interviewed tomorrow, December 21st. The committee also received, on behalf of the City of Alba, a donation of $500,000 from the Kirk and Drew Washburn family for the pool project. Additional support is definitely encouraged, and the pool committee does plan to make a recommendation regarding the firm that we feel like best meets our needs to the Parks and Buildings Committee on January the 6th at their next regular scheduled meeting. Additional grants will be pursued.
Council have any questions? Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Kay.
Yep.
Anything else to add? All right. Next item is the Economic Development Committee meeting held on December 9th, 2021. Connor.
A lot of good discussion. We got an update from Neil Williams. We discussed possible community needs that might encourage economic development. We talked about some things that the chamber's been doing, and then talked about possible aesthetic improvements as far as updating some aging city property and things like that. There weren't any action items.
Council have any questions? All right, next item is the cemetery meeting held on December 9th. Angelica?
It was our regularly scheduled meeting. I apologize, I don't have it pulled up. I know we talked about, had another discussion on staffing. And there was a tentative item for potential oil lease for the land that the cemetery owns, but the company had rescinded that offer by the time the meeting rolled around. So we weren't, it wasn't up for discussion. I do believe that was all. I apologize, I don't have the minutes pulled up to make sure. But I think it was just a very, pretty routine meeting. And discussed financial statements and some staffing, and that was the gist of the meeting.
Does council have any questions?
I was just going to ask, I was asked by somebody in that committee for the cemetery if there was any luck working out, they're still short a member for mowing and stuff like that. Have we had any inquiries on that position?
We actually have, it wasn't for the cemetery specifically, but we've been trying to find temporary staff to finish up just right-of-way mowing around the city, and we have had some movement in that area.
They just indicated that there had been no traction if there was any interest in raising that potential rate of income.
We haven't had a discussion on raising that, but we have had some interest.
But I guess some people are still applying.
Yes, yes.
Any other questions from the council? Thank you. Next item is the airport commission meeting on December 13th. Angelica, I'm going to ask you to take that one too, because I was absent.
Yeah, no problem. We had discussion on the primary discussion was on the runway lights that are not currently working. We made the determination that we would work with an electrical company to put a temporary threshold in that would allow the runway lights that are operational. It's about 3,900 feet of runway lights that we would allow them to work. And at the time, we hadn't been able to contact Air Evac to determine if that would be enough runway space for them to land. I have since then been in contact with them, and that is sufficient. That is sufficient runway for them to land on. I believe Williams Electric will be here right after the beginning of the year to work on that and get that up and running. So we should have, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, should have operational runway lights for at least 3,900 feet of the runway. And then they will continue work replacing 1,000-foot segments at a time around the runway, trying to find the area where we have a short in the electrical circuit.
I will add, this is felt more likely to be an insurance claim due to a power surge. And so they just had a real difficult time locating where the problem is in that. So.
And I have been in contact with the insurance company. We've corresponded back and forth with some questions. They will send somebody out to investigate. To my knowledge, they've not been on site yet. So.
Does council have any questions?
Will they come back once we isolate the short just to confirm for insurance, or are they just going to come out here? Because if they can't find it, how will they determine?
I'm not sure what the insurance company's process will be.
I was just curious if they'll have to come out again.
Generally, in those instances, they have to determine if there was an event that would, like a lightning strike or a power surge. If there was an event and if that event occurred, what our responsibility is versus what the damage really was.
There was something, because we experienced it at the nursing home as well. And so, whether they see it that way or not, I'm not sure. But, any other questions regarding the airport? All right, next item is the Alva Public Library Board meeting held on December 13th, 2021. Mr. Dowling.
For the month of November, 1,639 items were checked out. 678 of those were ebooks or audiobooks, and 45 items were deselected from the current collection. And the computers were checked out 85 times for that. The biggest thing we reviewed, and I think they have sent off with very minor changes to the policies that we're looking for. Basically use, the ability to bring drinks into the library, and the terms that we set for restrictions for the meetings, basically that you're not, that you're telling both sides of the story and not just having a political debate that's one-sided, just kind of to keep that type of stuff out of the library and be as fairly from a viewpoint. So pretty minor stuff, and no major changes from last year. We we spoke about reviewing the technology plans in spring, just something the library would like to, a standard the library would like to set on themselves, just to make sure that they're planning properly for the future of their technology, since 85 people do use their computer systems. They also informed us about the repair to the east wall in the youth library was complete. The plan is to open up the youth library for grab-and-go service in January, with the COVID virus still being of concern for all librarians' patrons. Any kind of youth program is still on hold, and activity bags will continue for the next 6 weeks. And that's kind of what they've done to supplement their youth program, since we don't want children being down in the library. Ventilation is pretty bad, especially down in some of those areas. The library has started receiving items for purchase with the ARPA grant funds. Patrons made positive comments about the comfort level of the new computer chairs and how they're easy to clean, along with additional desks for furniture. It was the primary use of that, and then they're still looking at using those funds to extend their wireless coverage. And that wraps up the library meeting in a pretty nice bow, other than they did have the directors, or the committee chairs holiday dinner, which was very nice. We loved it. It was lasagna from Alva's Market.
Does the council have any questions for Taylor? Thank you. Next item is a Personnel Committee meeting held on December 14th, 2021. Mr. Bowman.
So we had
talked about-
discussion on the grant writer position. Everyone felt like we were ready to go on that, so I worked to get that posted on the website. And then we really spent most of our time on personnel updates and talking about things that were going on with personnel throughout the city.
Does the council have any questions regarding the Personnel Committee meeting? All right. Next item is the Public Safety Committee meeting held on December 14th, 2021. Mr. Dowling.
Okay. The primary focus of that meeting was actually to speak about the fee increase that we're proposing here, which I guess I can get into a little bit just to spread up the times of talking, so you guys can hear about the fee and some of the impacts those have. The additional items, which that meeting was scheduled for an hour and a half, lasted an hour and a half, and we pushed off most of the items that concerned the police department and our reviewing of our current ordinance for vehicles to another day. So it was the primary thing that we're talking about. So I guess I'll just get into it. So basically this is coming back all the way from May 19th. Basically when Quitclaim reviewed, when we went to the new billing company, they reviewed our rates, and they kind of indicated that as far as it goes for billing rates, we are considerably the cheaper ambulance service when it comes to our fees and rates compared to locally. They also discussed kind of just a general consensus of what is happening in our area compared to these. And so I'll go into that, but basically we'll just go into what the new fee structure sets are two different classification types based off the old. One is resident and non-resident. A resident is defined as somebody who has their primary address as a zip code located in Woods County. So we're not just the city of Alva, but the county as a whole. And basically, if you're a non-resident, you're looking at $100 as an additional fee to your charge, regardless of what field of fee it is in. The other change that we're making is we are listing as a non-emergency and an emergency. And so we'll go with the lesser of the two increases. So when we're talking about the non-emergency, the largest change that somebody in a non-emergency capacity will receive is that to mileage, which is a $12 per mile is what we charge now, and we're going up to $18. This was found to be the average for what is basically in our local area. WW, Woodward, CO, EMS being 12, Alfalfa being 18, Winoka being 20, and our rates were 12.
I don't think that one was necessarily the average. I think we were, that one was not the average.
So I guess
we had selected, yes.
Yeah. So, and then additionally, for a non-emergency, you're looking at only an increase of $5, about $5 on your base fee outside of mileage. This is with a reduction of $45 to your basic BLS, which my understanding is just your basic ambulance ride, no thrills or anything like that. And I guess technically there is an increase, I think, to the advanced life support, but you can't have a non-emergency life support too. If it is an emergency call, your bill will increase for a basic life support by $150. If it is an emergency advanced life support, it'll increase by $275, and then it'll increase by $275 for the ALS2, advanced life support level 2. But that distinction, you have to have somebody who is qualified on your ambulance to receive that, and that's paramedic, from my understanding. And so that, in a nutshell, is what we are looking at increases our fees on top of that for the non-residents. Now, a little bit more topic of conversation that I think is a little bit more open to debate is what we're talking about is how does that affect our department as it currently stands. So if we look at the calendar year of 2018 to 2020, we see that the revenue predicted for that ambulance department was $135,000. So the city had to offset its cost of the total budget for 2019 to 2020, which the total EMS budget for that year was $647,000. So the city, from the general fund, would have to make up that additional budget allocation, from my understanding, which is just over $50,000, or 10, okay? And so doing that same math to this current budget statement, the revenue predicted for the EMS was $496,000. I have recently spoken to the city, and my understanding is that comes down to two assumptions. First, that because of the new billing increase, the new predicted fees will be $332,000, and they said they have calculated in half of the predicted 522 money, which was calculated at $1,063,000. If that makes sense. So that means that the general fund will only have to offset $224 to make the ambulance budget work out, to provide it to it. And that's what the current budget is set at. It is my understanding that from the numbers I have been given, when we're calculating out the current billing rate of what will change, it's not necessarily an easy thing to predict because you'll never know how many people will need the ambulance service in any given year. So these numbers are highly assumptive, even if they're the best. And so what I've been given is the assumption of numbers based off of not what we receive in return, but what the bottom line if we got everything we could ever get, which is an impossible standard to go by. So at the current calendar year, during my calculations, I've been given 8 months. I took the lowest month, duplicated it twice to get 10 just to make my math easier, and left 2 months completely off because we don't have predictions for those. I cut that number in half from the total just to be a safe predictive revenue, and so with our current model, that's $250,000 approximately. So a little bit less than what the city believes with $332,000, but still within that ballpark. So what we are predicted doing the same exact math to the increased rate fee, we're looking at receiving potentially $315,000. So basically a difference, an increase of about 20%. And so that would mean that, given a little bit of wiggle room, the city would only have to provide, if all the numbers worked out, between $50,000 to nothing for the ambulance service to operate off of next year. And this would be, from my calculations, 70% of offsetting the cost of currently. What we're currently doing is more than we've ever done in any calendar year. And that's kind of just what the numbers, the fee we're proposing, and the numbers of kind of how it sets currently. And we can get more into like who's affected by that when we talk about the fees and doing the forward-looking thing. But I guess, are there any other questions about that? Other than probably a lot.
Yeah, I have a lot, but they center around it. I'll wait till the agenda item.
Do you ever get the number of resident versus non-resident residents?
I do have a number for that. It has not been replicated in our current system, but from my understanding, and I guess that's a big point of the fees, would be the majority of the calls that the ambulance receives, according to the numbers I have, it's much higher for emergency calls. The majority of people, when you're calling the ambulance, it's an emergency. And that is a ratio, I'd say it's usually 2 times the number of emergency calls to non-emergency. Sometimes, some months it's 4 times, some months it's the exact same. But on average, it's more in any given month. For my number, so if we look at the total number of transports in 2019, there were 532. 58 of those people lived in Woods County as was a resident. 474 lived outside the county, according to those numbers. And in 2020, if there were 403 in total, there were 39 of those people were Wood County residents, and there were 364 non. And that's just to the numbers that I have here.
So you're saying the numbers indicate that the majority of our transports are non-residents?
That would be what I've been led to believe, yeah. But I don't have a lot of good numbers to back that up, other than, yeah.
So where did we draw to that conclusion? How did we come to that? Because I mean that's substantial. I mean we're saying 80-90% of our transports are non-residents.
But that might just be a number that doesn't add a lot of sense. From my understanding, the way it was taken.
Was that in our meeting? Did we?
We covered that. It would have been
It was in a
not
previous
2 months
meeting.
meeting, but yeah, it's been several meetings ago.
So how was that, like, where did those numbers come from?
From my understanding, what we did essentially with those numbers is there was a way on the program there was a way in the program in the billing company to subtract people's based off their primary, the zip code of their primary residence that they gave, and that is how that was deducted. So it removed everybody who was that supplied a zip code inside of that.
Was that looking outside of our service area or outside of the county?
That's a
That's
good
not how
question.
the context
And
numbers.
we did not have time necessarily, from my understanding, to verify these numbers or see how they could reproduce them in our current system.
I don't know if I can, but can I ask Bridget a question?
I don't have a problem with that.
Would you agree that those numbers sound correct based on your experience?
What was the number again?
It was something. I mean, it's about 80% roughly of our transports are out of Woods County residents. Does that sound right to you? Okay.
All right. So then this probably, what I would say then is, in consideration of these numbers, assume that the majority of people will be non-residents necessarily, because that's honestly what I think of in the top of my head, but that's not what this indicates. So it might be less from the truth than we'd like. But, yeah.
We talked at pretty good length about our equipment as well. That the average age of all of our rigs is about 15 years old. We've got some significant equipment issues. I think if you drive along the boulevard about any given day, you'll see one of our rigs either parked at Garnett's or Wendy's for work. And so we do have concerns about equipment moving forward. Are there any questions from the council? All right, we'll get into that more later in the agenda. Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah, no problem.
Next item is the Finance Committee meeting held on December 20th, 2021. Mr. Martin?
The majority of the meeting was spent receiving the audit report, which the council will get in just a little bit. Just some quick numbers here for you. The cash balances for all of the city's cash accounts sit at $2.7 million currently. Financial overview for all major funds shows that the city's collected 41% of budgeted revenue and expended 35% of budgeted expenses. Sales tax for the month of November, City of Alva received $327,000 in sales tax. Sales and use tax total $358,000. This is down 2.4% from October 2021, but up 1.75% from November of 2020. Sales and use tax sits at 45% currently for this year's budget. Utility billing is at 47% of this year's budget. So, you have to answer any questions.
Does council have any questions? Financial report? Thank you. Next item is the mayor's report, and I'm going to ask Randy, though, to give an ordinance committee report.
Yes, we met on December 7th. We discussed the beekeeping ordinance, which I believe ours says it is illegal
Yes.
and goes against state statutes or whatever. So I believe we decided somehow we're going to ask to rescind existing wording, because if we try to go in and actually add wording, we're kind of just ballparking ideas and stuff to try to how to fit it and everything. And so I believe we're talking about just trying to remove our language that says we cannot have beekeeping, arbories.
Apiary.
Yeah, okay. And we discussed the business license ordinance more. We had some kind of some wording changes in there, and I believe we ended to send it back to Rick with those changes to consider, I believe. And discussion on nuisance ordinance, I don't really remember what all we did much on that.
I don't think we made it that far.
Yeah, I think we ate up our time between bees and business.
They still have another hour and a half meeting.
Yeah, so that's my report.
Does the council have any questions for Randy? All right, thank you. I'll keep my report brief. I did I made mention, I think at the last council meeting, of some upcoming meetings and opportunities with OML for the legislative events and then the Congress of Mayors. And as I get the registration information, I want to have Angelica forward that on to the council members. So anyone that's interested and able to attend any of those things would have access to that information. It has been a busy time of year, and we have, as you can tell by the number of committee reports, we've been very active. I'll conclude, and I could have brought this up during the Parks and Buildings Committee meeting, but I did receive notification from Johnny Jones with Share Trust today that with regard to the pool project, they intend to, or they have pledged a $1.5 million dollar-for-dollar match. So if whatever we raise, they'll match up to $1.5 million, and including the $500,000 donation that the Washburn family gave already. So we are at $1 million in fundraising as of that, and so anticipate more donations to be coming in, and Share Trust is looking forward to writing some checks. So it was, Johnny and I had a good conversation, and I was real excited. It was unexpected, and so that's why good news for the day. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions. All right. Next item is the business manager's report.
I don't want to update it.
What? I missed
No,
one?
I'm sorry. You're moving on up.
It's fine. You're fine. I thought you were missing one.
I was going to update everyone on the emergency meeting that we had on, I don't remember what day that was, earlier this month. Cobalt Construction was able to come in and complete the repairs to the water line north of town that supplies water to Capron's Water District. That project ended up costing us $17,100. They did not have to, I think in the meeting we had discussed they were going to use the original 90-plus-year-old water line as a sleeve to potentially put poly pipe through and use that as our fix, our temporary fix. We did not have to do that. by the time Cobalt's crews were able to arrive on scene the next morning, between the county and the city, the county had come in and they were able to dig down further and they were able to find the pipe where the line was broken. And so Cobalt Construction then was able to come in. They had, with their experienced crew, isolate the water line leak, cut it out, and replace the water line leak on that line. So obviously that was a much more cost-effective method than what we potentially would have had to do. So that worked very well. They were able to get that project done on Thursday, and then our water department had another week that next day, but they were able to tackle that one, and so far we've managed to keep most of those at bay. The contractor that is putting the fire hydrants in at the high school, the one at the edge of the driveway and one up by the new practice facility, they began that project today. So they'll be boring about 1 block of water line and able to connect the fire hydrant that will sit just to the entrance of the high school parking lot, and then they'll connect the other one up off of Apache up to where the new training facility sits. That project starts today. We ran into a couple bumps, so I know we have an agenda item later on the utility authority to add some time to their contract. At this time, we still feel we'll be able to meet that deadline, but it's never good when you start a project and then you have some bumps in the road, so hopefully that will progress better. I did want to give, I know we did this on Facebook, but I did want to also just thank Lance Hartman for his years of volunteering to put our Christmas lights up. We did take a new approach to Christmas lights this year downtown. I think our street department did a great job hanging the wreaths and lighting the poles. Very excited to see that. And we did mention that going forward, the city and the chamber plan to hopefully have some new things to downtown Christmas lights. So we'll, as we determine what that looks like and what those are going to be, we'll hopefully have some more updates there. I did want to talk about several council members on December 16th. We virtually attended some training on ARPA funding and what those uses could potentially be. I know I felt like there was a lot of information, I think, but it was good information for us to learn, just kind of helping us understand the uses and then how our reporting needs to be done. And then really those were the basic pieces of it. Would any of you who attended that meeting, Greg or Gail, Taylor, do you guys have anything to add on that?
I found it interesting, they said to piggyback some federal and state money or grants if you can.
So I thought it was very interesting. It seemed kind of like the state's handing out a lot of money and then counting on the federal government to make sure you follow the rules on that. But that, and then I was excited to see the next round of funding that was coming out that's more focused on infrastructure and roads and stuff. It's really important.
And then I also wanted to give an update on our petition audit. I talked to Jay Holland from the State Auditor and Inspector's Office. He called me the beginning of last week, actually, and just wanted to let us know. When they came on site, they gathered all the information. He and his boss put the report together, and then it basically has been sitting in queue for review. That review, he told me that we are next in line for the review process, and so we should anticipate maybe some additional questions. But then that should be out shortly. I would say that may be relative since we've been working on that for about a year now, but hopefully we'll have that report back soon. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions that the council has.
Does the council have any questions? Thank you. Next item is number 7, remarks and inquiries by citizens. We'll ask that anybody that has remarks that they would approach the podium and state their name. And if you haven't signed in, please sign in on the sheet up there. You'll have 2 minutes to address the council. Randy, will you keep time?
Hello, I'm Joe Phillips. I have signed in already. I want to talk a little bit about item number 10. I think it was number 10 with the rate hike. I am a board member of the 522 for Woods County 522 Board. And I've talked with several of the commissioners, or the council members, and the commissioners as far as that goes. But anyway, there will be $325,000 or $315,000, somewhere in that neighborhood, dollars that goes to the city of Alba. And that money has actually already started coming in. People are paying their taxes, and that money has already started coming in. Most of that money will be in there before July 1st, which is your new budget year. I just don't understand why we would need to have a rate hike, and we're actually, which we already voted on that. The people of Alva, the citizens of Alva voted and are now giving you $325,000 more. And you say, well, it may not end up $325,000. We've already taken out 20% of the projected amount. So it's actually, that projected amount is already about $375,000. So more than likely, you're going to get really close to $325,000. And the budget in the past was $600,000 for the ambulance service. And I read, I talked to a member, and he said that the budget's gone up $100,000. Well, yeah, it has, but it should have gone up $325,000, because now we're giving you another $325,000. And I shouldn't say we are, but the citizens of Alva are. So we're giving you another $325,000. I'm not saying that it would be that the ambulance service is going to be on its own and making money for the city of Alva, or even breaking even, but we never have in the past. I would just say, vote no.
Thank you, Joe. Any other remarks? Okay. Move on to item number 8. Is he ready?
Yes, he did just text me.
Item 8 is a presentation of the fiscal year 2019-2020 audit by Chris Angel of Angel Johnston and Blessing Game PC. Chris, can you hear us? Turn this, I think the sound bar
It's
timed
not,
out.
I just turned it on. Just 1 second, Chris.
It kept shutting off the last time we used it, like every couple minutes.
We can see you, but we can't hear you.
I'm afraid to unplug something. Let me see. I think we just need to unplug the sound bar too. I don't know which item it is now.
No, the soundbar's on, because yeah, that's static of that.
Chris, can you try talking to us?
Yeah, he's not coming to the soundbar.
Can we just have it come through the TV?
If it's hooked up that way, yeah. but that's what it's under the impression it's coming out now, is the computer and not the software.
If we, can we unplug the soundbar, or you don't think that will?
It's deleted within Teams.
No.
No, I don't think so.
No, it's not.
I can unplug the soundbar from power.
Yeah, see if that'll.
That's it.
Chris, can you,
That's power for the soundbar.
yeah, that was part of the summer, so it's not on. We had this problem last year. But we
Let's see,
had-
and that's what, yeah, should.
What about now, Chris?
If we want to, we could see him, just call him on the phone.
Yeah, I'm gonna call your cell phone, Chris. It won't be nearly as loud, I apologize.
Hello?
Hi, I apologize. I think we had this problem last time.
Seems like we did.
All right, I think we're ready for you.
Okay. I think you have a copy of the audit draft in front of you, or actually the final financial statements for the year ending June 30th, 2020. And I need to let you know what the purpose of the audit is, so that that's clear. Some people think that we have an audit and I've checked every single thing, everything's okay, but really our purpose is to give an opinion on the financial statements. These financial statements are used by third-party individuals that want assurances that the information they're getting from the city is accurate and correct. So the primary purpose of our audit is to look over the financial statements and at the end give an opinion whether or not we think these accurately reflect the financial condition, your assets and liabilities as of June 30th of 2020, and the activity for the year ending June 30th of 2020. And on the front of that report, our opinion letter does say that we believe that a third-party user can rely upon these financial statements to accurately reflect what happened last year. Now that's within, there's materiality, there's no major, we did enough work that we can say there's no major misrepresentations in the report. In the report, we also did make a comment about the going concern, the fact that the finances are still very difficult, and that we got a little bit of a battle to get ourselves back in a situation where we feel comfortable that we're going to be able to repay all the debt and all the funds that we borrowed from at this point. So we do have that comment in there for readers of that to be aware of that. I also need to make you aware of any major adjustments that we made during the audit process. And during the audit process, we actually felt like there needed to be a change in the presentation of the pooled cash accounts. The general fund and the utility authority had borrowed money from various cash accounts in order to meet operations over the last few years. When we initially got the financial statements, it was showing that there was cash in these various different cash accounts. The accounts that are other than the general fund and the utility authority had cash. But actually that cash was, for the most part, not there because the cash was actually has been borrowed by the general fund. So it showed cash in those accounts, then showed an overdraft balance in the general fund and the utility authority. But the pronouncements are pretty clear that what you need to really do is show the cash in each account. If it's been borrowed, go ahead and reduce the cash in all those individual accounts and just replace that with basically a note receivable where the general fund owes that. So we had to make an entry to take some money out of cash, put it in these cash funds showing the amounts that are due from the general fund.
So that was the adjustment that we made. It didn't change the net income, but we felt like it more clearly showed the cash position and felt kind of was in line with national standards. So we need to make you aware of that. The other item that I want you to be aware of is on page 79 of the report. On page 79 of the financial statements, the report shows that we had two findings. Findings are things that are significant enough that we feel like a third-party reader of the financial statements needs to be aware of, and also even the council and members that rely on financial statements need to be aware of. So the two items that we report on page 79, one has to do with at the end of the year, the condition there on 20-001 finding is that the general fund owed other funds $2,179,000 at the end of the year, and the utility authority owed $392,000, and that was an increase of about 12% over the prior years. And when we talk about the cause and effect, the next paragraph then explains that this has been a kind of an ongoing situation where the balance has grown from 2016 from $227,000 has grown over the last few years up to $2.5 million when you combine those two amounts that are owed up above. We felt like that some of this was hidden or wasn't readily obvious because of the use of full cash. Now, there's nothing wrong with full cash. Full cash is basically saying, let's put different funds, cash, all in one account. That way we can just write checks, the same checks, and the reconciliation of the accounts just include one fund. Also, by doing that, some places have found that it's easier for them to have investments. So if one fund has an excess of money that they don't really need of $100,000, another one has one that has 50, another one has 70, they can pull those together and then make investments that maybe they couldn't do otherwise. So a lot of communities have this, although most of mine do not, but several do. But in doing this, what also happens is if one account runs out of money, they can write a check and it will clear the bank because there's actually cash from other accounts, other funds that are in this bank account. And that's what's actually happened here. So what needs to be done, and I think has been implemented is a process now of tracking that very carefully so that you know exactly where you stand in every account at the end of every month, and then that's communicated to the Finance Committee, and they can monitor the progress on that. I'll say in the back of the report on page 82 is actually the city's response to that. And they said that in the 2021 year, they implemented a hiring freeze and budgeted for a surplus to help repay the borrowed funds, and they were able to repay about $371,000 back. So this is actually what's happened after the audit, which was the June 30, 2020 audit. By the end of the next year, they paid back the amounts due to and due from reduced down $371,000, and we did note that there. Also, they have now placed a 5% of the sales tax into a savings account. They set up a situation where they're making put money into there on a monthly basis, and we noted that implementation. So there's the steps that they've taken. The other finding that we had was related to the utilities. We noticed there was a utility rate increase that went into effect the year we audited. It was in July of 2019. And we noticed that not all of the rates got implemented into the system correctly. We don't know exactly how much money was missed out on by not getting the rates implemented correctly, but we estimated at a minimum about 52,000, and could have been over 100,000 that might have been missed out on the revenue. the subsequent year that was resolved, their actual response to that on page 82, the city has implemented a staff procedure to verify each fee schedule has been correctly updated upon change. We find this happens very frequently in the communities we audit. The actual computer input of the rate changes is fairly complex, and we find about the only way of making sure you get them right is after you put them in there the way you think you are, print them out or run them next month before you send them out, spot check through the different possible rates, high users, low users, in the city limits, outside the city limits, all the different possible categories, and try to make sure that it was calculated right. You think you have it right, but unless you do that, you really don't. So that was our recommendation on that. So that's really a quick overview of what's happened last year and our findings, and the fact that we were able to put an opinion letter up front saying these are reliable financial statements. So, after that, I'll just open to any questions that anybody might have.
I just want to clarify, Chris, I know what you're talking about last year, but that is year ending June 30th, 2020. It's not the last fiscal year that we had. So
Yes, I'm sorry about that. When I'm talking mostly about the years I'm logged in, we're talking about, yes, year ending June 30, 2020. And subsequent to that, they pay that down some in the 2021 year. They were able to reduce some of that due to new funds. And then also on the utility rates, the problems were in the year ending June 30, 2020. And so,
Does the council have any questions for Chris?
I was just going to ask for some clarification on page 33 through the receivables. Just the column that's less allowances for uncollectible accounts, is that the amount that is 33? I didn't know if that number was specifically, just because it relates to a lot of things we're discussing later in the meeting, that the ambulance fee and the large amount that is uncollectible.
Right. Now, that's, that actually, they have not, that is amounts from years and years and years, over a decade, I think, on that, receivables. So, so there's a huge write-off, because generally on most of those, if you don't collect it within a year, it's very rare that you're going to get one. Every once in a while you'll have somebody come in and pay over a year, but very rare. So that's why that huge amount that shows in there, that's cumulative amounts that are in there. And yeah.
I had another question, I guess, if nobody else has.
Go ahead, Taylor.
I think it's on page 43.
Okay.
I was hoping that you could kind of cover the 15, those transfers, and then on page 44, there are those transfers that are inter-fund loan. I just didn't know where are those pulling from in the different classifications, and do they relate to the number that we're talking about that came from the pooled cash accounts?
Okay. Yes. The 43 is actually a list of what happened last year of funds that were transferred between funds that are not subject to repayment. These are permanent transfers. Always the large one is like the sales tax, goes from the general fund to the hospital authority. But there were some others that were transferred around. But that's what that schedule is, those are money that's gone, it's out of that fund and now permanently in the other funds. And so it just shows what fund it came from and where it went. The next page is actually what we're talking about when we're talking about the amounts that are outstanding. That shows, in the first column there, first column shows who it is due from, and then the next column shows which funds need to be paid back, and that's the dollar amounts, and it comes to that $2,572,000 that needs to be repaid.
Okay, that clears it up.
Are there any other questions for Chris?
I don't have a question, but I would like to know that that 2.5 million that he's referring to is the number that we anticipated prior to this, that we've been paying back. That's not an increase from what we expected. So that's being a year and a half out, that's a little unclear, but.
That's correct. I think, as far as, Chris made mention of what we indicated in the management letter, the measures that we would take to correct issues, and I think we talked about this in Finance Committee, but on June 30th, 2020, which is the year we're talking about here, our pool cash balance was $150,000, almost $151,000. As we sit here today, our pool cash balance is, it's over $2.7 million. So we have made significant strides to getting those interdepartment borrowed funds to get us in a position to where those are repaid. And I do want to give credit to the staff and management for making sure that they were diligent with the purse strings over the last year and a half, because we've had to really sacrifice in order to get to this point. So I just had that comment as well. But
Is there any way to have a ballpark idea, like what, the money that was borrowed, where was it basically spent? Is there any way to kind of know what areas benefited from that borrowing that was not, what departments it was street?
it was spent in the general fund.
The general fund and the utility authority.
I was just going to ask, does the transfers that are listed in this on 43 that are just the normal ones that don't need to be, are those typically the transfers we see?
I think that varies, doesn't it?
It does.
Hospital authority, the scholarship and economic development, the street and alley fund would be, even AUA probably would be.
Yes. I would say my opinion would be that those, even though they may not be required to be paid back, it is our intent to pay them back. From a finance committee
No.
perspective.
No, these are the.
Yeah, these,
No, that does include some of the, these are some of our pooled cash funds. Not all of them, but some of them are part of our pooled cash. They just are not restricted in the fact that we don't have to pay them back.
oh, okay, so yeah, fair enough. Then,
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
For the hospital authority line, that's money that was out of that hospital tax that went to, it came to
And
the city then?
that is the hospital tax that came to the city that we turn around and pay to the hospital. That one would not be one that we would be paying back. That is the transfer from the city to the hospital for that
That's
1.25%.
the 1.25%. Okay. I guess.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Chris. We'll move on to our action item. We do appreciate you spending time with us and making sure that our reports are accurate and helping us to see where we can make some improvements. So we really appreciate it.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Bye, Chris.
Item 9 is discussion and action on the acceptance of the fiscal year 2019-2020 annual audit, which we just heard. I would entertain a motion.
Motion to accept the fiscal year 2019-2020 annual audit.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Stelling, a second by, I have a motion by Mr. Winters with a second by Mr. Stelling. Is there any further discussion? Please call the vote.
Winters,
Yes.
Stelling,
Yes.
Beer,
Yes.
Swallow. Yes. Brooks,
No.
Martin,
Yes.
Dowling,
Yes.
Bowman,
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to item number 10. Discussion and action to approve resolution number 2021-013, authorizing a change of rates charged for ambulance transports. Taylor, you want to?
Fair enough. I guess just going back, one of the things that I did not cover, I guess, between one of the fee schedules that might be a little bit of important is what's defined as an emergency and a non-emergency. An emergency, from my understanding, defined from the, I think this is the Medicare page from the ambulance book. It defines emergency response is a BLS or an ALS-1 level of service that has been provided in immediate response to a 911 call or equivalent, and immediate response is one in which the ambulance provider/supplier begins as quickly as possible to take steps necessary to respond to the call. And so, I think there's also also a statute under the definition that would mean that it's medically necessary to be life-saving. So it has to, you have to medically need that response for it to also be considered that. So a little bit more clarification. But I guess is there any other questions?
Professional services, non-patient, is that for anything that's been response when they don't transport? Is that going to apply to everybody they go pick up, off the floor to put back in their recliner?
No, that actually is for, if we would have to transport someone from a hospital, say, to the airport for a fixed-wing medical flight, that's what we can charge the area back that fee to, because we're transporting that patient for them from the hospital to the airport.
You're not just charging the regular run rate then?
No.
And it's my understanding that we also, I think this was a fee that was apparently previously on the billing, but we look to enforce more, which is the no transport one. And that's if somebody refuses service through the ambulance department, or am I completely wrong about that? I would say it's...
There isn't a no treat, no transport rate listed.
So that's if you pick somebody up, just...
The treatment, no transport?
The refusal/non-transport. It would be the treatment, no transport. Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's my understanding of what that would be that fee. That if somebody came to your house and you fell and they needed, and previously, from my understanding, it's just a quick call on the ambulance departments.
Does the police department help people up anymore that have fallen, or just strictly go to EMS?
EMS and
I
fire.
say, Bridget, I would let you, it would essentially be
As far as
EMS
I know, it's just
or fire.
EMS and fire. Fire doesn't usually go on their own. They're just police.
The rate change suggestion and proposal, conversation started several months ago. Because we have, and just like every other department in our city, we have aging equipment that we don't invest enough in up front, and then it doesn't last very long, and then we're back in the same boat again to how are we going to take care of these things. You know, when our newest piece of equipment on the ambulances, our newest ambulance is a 2018 model, I believe, and then the rest of them, between the other three, one of them's 30 years old. Oh, I thought you were going to correct me. Okay. But, you know.
Which one's 30 years old?
Which one's 30 years?
No, it's not 30.
Did I mess that up?
I would say we did.
Is it
1994.
All of our purchase
Is it
blocks.
94, 95?
Oh, okay. The oldest one is a 2000 model. The oldest one's a 2000. So 21 years old, but the average is 15 years. There's a 1994 model, 94 model. Golly, you threw me off, Troy. I do need to know the average. But the oldest one's a 94 model. We've got a 2000 model, 2011 model, and a 2018.
Didn't we recently just buy an ambulance?
A 2018.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
Wow, I feel like that was yesterday.
And that's the rut we get in when we don't have the funds available to do things. And so, you know, the rates are something that, by and large, an insurance company is going to pay these, and our residents aren't going to feel that. By and large, the people that are paying the tax are going to feel it a lot less than the people that aren't paying the tax. And it would set us up to be able to have a capital replacement program and allow the 522 funds to continue to be towards the operation.
We got a lot of insurers that are self-insured now because they make, especially all your farmers and small business people, because they make too much to get a subsidized, on the exchange policy, but they can't afford to get a straight unsubsidized policy. So there's quite a few uninsured people that would probably wind up hitting, I think. So.
Well, and we had the billing company run the perspective, where did I put it? There, right in front of me. But total charges, and we've got to take out insurance contractuals, but when we take out contractuals and bad debt or anything else, that comes out, we're looking at $60,000 a year, every 2 years that would about buy us an ambulance. And that's what we're talking about.
I would like to say that, in this discussion, part of the reason the discussion was started was by our billing company. They recommend, just like any other business in the medical industry, that you review your rates on an annual basis. And so that was initially how that started. And when we looked at it, we didn't go with the highest rate change. We didn't, we looked at what our local surrounding agencies were charging as well. And so ourselves included in that, looked at the average of what that would be, and we're trying to stay consistent with what our local surrounding areas are. We looked statewide and region-wide as well, and that wasn't necessarily a good fit for us. And so I think from my perspective, regardless of if we intend to make that change tonight, I do feel like that from a business perspective, that is something that we need to be reviewing more regularly than once every 9 years. I do feel like that our mileage rate, should be reflective of our current, fuel situation. That does need to be looked at on a more frequent basis than every 9 years. So that being said, I do think it's important for us to review those changes and make sure that they are appropriate and that we align them with our surrounding agencies as well. It's beneficial to us to do that.
Well, how much did you say we're bringing in right now for the billing company?
From the billing, so we are anticipating, what we budgeted for this year was to approximately $330,000 in billing. So we anticipated $160,000 is what we were hoping to get from the 522 district.
During this fiscal year, we understand the amount is going to be more than that.
Yes.
During this fiscal year,
Yes.
that's amount we expect to get.
Thank you for clarifying that. This being the first year, knowing the board needed to be established and that those funds would need to come in, we wanted to be conservative in our revenue projections for that. We also have changed.
But we were very liberal in our projections for collections.
Yes, based on the recommendation from QMC, who is our new billing company, we used information that they gave us to come up with those billing calculations. So far, since we've been with QMC, we've collected $150,000, and 70,000 of that is just this year, which will set us, if that collection rate continues as it has been, that will set us very well for the year. We may not be at that $330,000, but we should be on path for that.
So they're expected to bring in 330,000?
That's what, based on the information that they gave us, that's what we anticipated bringing in for this year. May or may not be as it sits, but that's what we anticipate.
And some of what has been brought in during this year is actually past bills it's for services that were completed in previous years.
Yeah.
How long have we been with the new billing system?
We started with them in March, April timeframe
Of
of 2021, yes.
So we've got about 600,000, projected 600,000 that's going to come in that the city's not going to, have to work out. So, that's quite a bit. I've had a lot of people that are really upset that have talked to me because they would have, if they knew that the city was going to increase rates, they would have never voted for that tax.
I'm going to play devil's advocate on that, in that the proposal we received from Prafford, which is who we were looking at with our RFP on outsourcing it, which is why we ended up ultimately doing this 522 district, was to keep that even more as a not viable option, because a lot of people didn't want to go that route. Their rates that they were quoting to us was not only going to cost the city out of the general fund around $330,000 to $350,000, I don't remember the numbers exactly. They were also going to double the rates that over what we were currently charging. So a run was going to be close to $2,000 as opposed to around $1,000 that they sit now. So when we talk about not voting for that, if we were going to raise the rates, if we didn't vote for that, the rates would be substantially different looking had we not, or even if we had gone with Prafford. So I would counter with that kind of a.
And I would just venture, I would reiterate what I said earlier, that, we need to look at our rates on an annual basis and review them to make sure they are appropriate. The 522 district money definitely is going to help us, but it's not going, it would be short-sighted, in my opinion, to think that we would never increase rates.
And I think it's also
Because of
important when
that.
we talk about the $300,000 in projected billing revenue, that's not a $300,000 increase over what we were receiving even prior to 522 funds. If I remember right, we were receiving just over 100,000.
It varied year to year.
120 to 130,000 a year-ish.
In revenue for 2019 and 2020, the revenue for the ambulance department was $135,000, 2018 to 2019, $196,000, and it is significantly larger starting 2017 to 2018 when it was $319,000. But that's, from my understanding, when they were billing better. And we're getting come down in 2016 to 2017, $316,000 to the height, which is 2015 to 2016, and it's $566,000.
You also have to remember that that's during the
Yeah, the
oil
oil,
boom.
yeah.
We were doing hundreds of calls,
Mhm.
more than regular.
So I think it was the $120,000 number is what we had at the time we were reviewing the RFP, so that's why that number sticks in my head. So we're not seeing a $300,000 increase there, and even with that, we had a $500,000 a year gap
Loss.
in funding versus revenues. With that said, I'll be honest. I'm playing devil's advocate with this because I'm struggling with this. Simply, a lot of it dealing with the timing. We did just pass the 522, and we haven't even gotten to fully see the fruits of that yet. Which could come in above estimate, below estimate, so forth. One of the big things that I asked, and I have asked Angelica this already, and she provided me these numbers, and I didn't bring them. So do you by chance have the Medicare, Medicaid numbers on you, and the split out of who falls under Medicare and Medicaid of our
I don't have,
runs?
it was 70% combined together.
That sounds right.
It was 70.4%.
That about 70% of all runs that we are taking, or around 70% of those, are Medicare and Medicaid runs. The majority of, if not all of Medicare and Medicaid patients would actually not see any of this increase. It actually wouldn't even result in an increase for us because of contractual amounts based on Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements. So that's something to keep in mind. 70% of our runs would not even see a change.
I just go back to, and we've done it since before I was mayor, where we kick the can down the road, and we won't spend money, or we won't try to get money we won't try to make our revenue situation better, but we want better of everything that our citizens want. They don't want, they want some assurances that ambulance is going to make it to Enid or Oklahoma City, and if they're in, some days it's, we don't put them on the road unless they're roadworthy. I'm not saying that. But the older a vehicle gets, those are concerns that I have. I want a person's life to be able to be taken care of, not the best we can, but for now, but to always be at a high standard.
But it just got a huge infusion of money, though.
Yeah, but we just...
This is the largest that the ambulance has ever been offset in its history that I know of from revenue, just because we have that 522 district money. So it's
I don't know.
the lowest.
I don't know that infusion of money is going to be adequate.
To the calendar, for the current budget, it falls, well, since we only budgeted for half, it falls in about $224,000 short of the total budget allocated now. But if you add, you got to subtract $160,000 if the rest of the 522 comes.
Because we've talked about at great length the need for competitive wages, the need for more, higher level providers, and all of these things cost money as well.
Well, there's two considerations here that I think you're leading into. Is when you say we're $200,000 short, we also have absolutely no capital outlay scheduled or budgeted for EMS this year. And didn't last year either. And then the second thing is we are looking at a 7% annual inflation, and based on what we have typically done with our wages, there's no way we can meet a 7% CPI in the coming year. But that's what we're looking at, is a nearly 7% CPI, which is how we base our citywide wage increases.
Whether we approve a proposal tonight or not, we need to tear this apart, make it right, but we've got to do something. We can't just, these have been the rates since 2012. 2012.
I think it always comes their responsibility to not look at it at times. We have costs that keep going up. I know everybody doesn't like continued rate changes, in which for many years there hasn't been hardly anything, but that's kind of how we got into this situation where we are. Everything's kind of upside down, or the trash service gets to where we don't do the capital outlay for improvements. We've got equipment that's falling apart. The streets for a long time, we did the $5 deal, but it covers very little, and everybody wants more and more, and our costs keep going up. But we have to be prudent. We have to keep up kind of with the times too, of what stuff costs to get higher quality, not quality, but qualification of service as far as like paramedic or something like that. I've always called it an Alva factor. There's a lot of people who are qualified for that type of they can go other places and make a lot more. So you almost got to pay them more to come here to, just because, it's just not, I mean, people live here, they like it and love it, but
Most
you
people
just
get it,
go
they
other
like it. It's hard to
places.
get them here. It's hard to get people.
Yes, it is, and we got to start upping the standard of what we pay to get,
Exactly what most people that talked to me thought that 300,000 was specifically for. It was to stack on top of their current budget so that they could buy new, capital out.
So we ultimately rejected that RFP and said, okay, well, there's other alternatives on the table to cover this shortfall. One of those was a 522 district, and another one was reviewing a new billing company. And we approached both of those, and that made up a portion of that $500,000 deficit. We also then turned around and added that $100,000, nearly $100,000 to their budget for this year over what they had the previous year, adding in a training budget to help with the paramedics, improving their medical direction. I mean, we actually unanimously, not that long ago, set to actually approve a higher tier than what they had originally even requested. So I feel like we have done a lot of what we had said we were going to do. Nothing of what we said indicated that they were going to see a $300,000 increase. We said they weren't going to see a budget cut, and they did. They saw a budget increase over what they had been previously budgeted, and even more than that, they saw an increase over what they even had requested from us. So, I mean, I have an issue with that argument in that that's not how that whole situation played out.
I would say, in that public safety committee meeting that we had, when we were talking about equipment, we were talking about the fact that we have 522 money coming in, and saying that meant that it would be easier for us to purchase new equipment for this department than it would be for, say, the police department, or the trash department for that matter. We recognize the fact that there is that additional revenue coming in, and so that's why we were having the conversation about, well, what does a new ambulance cost? Let's, taking into account the same conversation that we've had on the trash department, where we would like to see newer equipment purchased, and then, what's what I'm trying to say? Maintained, and we could turn it over more quickly, have a purchasing program.
We would never be driving
Or we wouldn't be driving
21-year-old or older.
1994 ambulances.
Don't make me do math.
I'm not gonna make you do.
Do you have our maintenance expenditures for EMS for this year, last year? Do you have any of that readily available?
I can go grab my laptop and get it if you'd like me to.
I mean, because that's
Take just a
a
second to pull
I
up.
thought they
factor
said
cost.
like 20,000 was just most recent, wasn't it? I feel like that number was brought up in the meeting.
If you'll, pardon me, I'll go grab it in just a moment. I can pull it up. I'm sure there's other conversation that you guys can discuss.
I don't know that we're trying to, budget for, like, make money or anything. I think we're trying to guesstimate to kind of get close to even, because every time we're behind, we rob from another department or another area that's, suffering. Everything right now is,
They're all set right now.
I mean, we start talking trash department, I mean, it'd take over $500,000 to try to get back up to where the equipment that, we've been trying to repair, and the guys have been wonderful about going the extra mile to go out, collect, with, smaller trucks just to get it picked up and stuff and everything. And plus, we've been waiting on parts and stuff. A lot of that stuff's kept us from getting stuff repaired. It's tough.
We may be days, I mean, I'm not trying to doom and gloom, but the ambulance equipment is not, it's, we could find ourselves in the same situation with EMS that we find ourselves with sanitation.
And that's not an option. Like,
No.
There isn't an alternative.
No.
You can't go grab a flatbed truck and transport somebody. It doesn't work. I mean, I guess it's better than nothing, but
I mean, sadly, costs are going up. And so, I mean, everything is just going up, and I mean, eventually we're going to have to increase rates to keep up with the supply and demand issue. Who knows how long that's gonna last? We'd all love it to go back down, but I don't see that happening in the foreseeable future. I mean, it's just something, another factor to consider, that, you know, 8 months ago, they may have been paying $20 for a box of gloves, but they're probably paying $150 now. And if we're already upside down on the budget and their deficit, where are we ever gonna make grounds for that? I mean, yes, like they said, the taxes for the 522 that we're paying is gonna help, but we still have to turn it around at some point.
No, we were definitely in a different economic situation when we passed that. Even only being a year
I mean,
ago,
who could have foreseen?
it changed significantly. What's the average life expectancy on an ambulance? I mean, obviously we have an average of 15 in our fleet, but I mean, it sounds like our goal is it'd be 8 years.
You know, 6 to 8 years, I would say would be time enough where the vehicle still maintains value at the time that we're selling it to somebody else.
While you're pulling that up, one concern that has been brought to my attention is people are worried that the city is taking the extra funds of the 522. All that is designated to EMS, correct? Like they're almost like restricted funds in a way. It is going to, if we collect 100,000, 400,000, that is going to the EMS fund,
But it's
correct?
fungible, you can take that, I mean, you may get that money, but then you just pull your money out, and that's what a lot of people view it as.
But we haven't demonstrated that yet. I mean, there's been nothing that we've done to demonstrate that. And none of us have stated
Well,
that.
that's current administration. I mean, you know, you can look back and say, well, such and such did this, but, and sure, anything's possible, but we've tried to, you know, implement.
Now, there's 5 new people on this council that weren't on here when that passed.
Well, the argument that Troy's made, because I see where they're coming from, is that when they voted for the 300,000, we had a $650,000 EMS budget that day. So if we add 300,000 to that, then our EMS budget should be 950,000. And so that's the viewpoint. Am I correct?
Yeah.
My issue with that is that's not at all what was said at the time of the 522 district, because of the fact that we said we cannot maintain a $500,000 deficit. If I add 300,000, bring in 300 more thousand, and expend 300 more thousand, I'm still $500,000 gap there. And that was stated multiple times through that process.
And in between the billing company, in between a proposal anyway with rate adjustments, that makes that unsustainable amount sustainable.
Well, it's no difference than fire and PD, they don't have the income stream that the ambulance does, and they don't have the tax that the ambulance does, but you don't, I mean, it's no different, they're not gonna make up that amount. The ambulance.
No, they won't, and they don't have any means to.
I know, the ambulance is fairly cheap compared to them, so that's the other view that a lot of people have.
So, yeah, because.
I think actually EMS is our second highest emergency services budget. Was it not?
I don't think it is technically. It might be the second highest. I think for this
Fire
current
was
budget,
the
here's the
highest.
fire, and then it goes, well, for my
Police is a little
calculation,
bit less.
it's fire at 8, police at 900,000, and then third EMS was 720.
So
But it is also true to say that between those 3 departments, the EMS offsets its costs the most by far. You know,
And we've had
almost
discussions.
70% of the EMS with the 522 district money is paid for the city. Where before it
And
was.
so it's fire, police, and then EMS.
That's right.
Is the one that
Yeah.
operated.
We're not breaking new ground for, you know, charge for EMS. I mean, every city or any place is gonna do that. I mean, the way I figure police and fire is kind of that's just almost a lost budget item that you're gonna figure that you're not gonna have revenue, especially on fire. You know, police, they have some and stuff, and that's just service we provide, and everything. But like I said, I think back to irresponsible if we don't operate the city properly to try to keep on top of things to where, I mean, it's just understood a lot of times. I mean, you get a service, something like EMS, you're gonna get a bill, and some people don't pay. You know, a lot of insurance knocks down, you know, between Medicare and stuff, it's just.
Did we explore or look at, it's been brought to me by a couple of people, There's several communities, and I think it was actually in some of the documentation I was sent or saw, or when I was looking, I think I was looking stuff up, I was researching prior to this. And there are several communities that provide like a subscription service, much like Air Evac is. Some of them are mandatory, some of them are voluntary. Was that considered as a possibility? Because that would cover
It's
our
actually one of the
self-insurance.
things that we said after,
Yeah.
during the meeting, that we would propose this rate schedule and then start working on a plan for a membership subscription. Because I think that would even make it more palatable to the people in our service area, our county, if they can have that option available to them.
So and I was just wondering if using that as an offset, so some of these increases that we're proposing for Woods County residents, that we could almost decrease that a little bit with the expected increase of a
Membership.
membership.
And has it ever been, is it unheard of to even go further than that, to say that paying for your increase of ad valorem tax for the 522 district is enough to allow you to become a membership automatically?
That would exclude all of Woods County.
No,
That would basically mean all of Woods County is covered for free.
Yeah,
As long as you're property owner.
And
Your
paying-
rent, basically.
about 300,000 per
Yeah,
year
I mean,
to the
that
EMS
is-
department.
It's debatable, they're paying it
Yeah.
indirectly to the property owner through rent, but.
And, well, yeah,
The-
that's would be the assumption, because you're not technically.
As far as that goes, I mean, we haven't excluded any ideas.
I'm just wondering if that would make this more palatable.
I think it's, I think that's a good discussion. I think that
Both to the
is,
community and
Yeah.
maybe members of the council, if we had something where, these rates were maybe, for the non-emergency, there's basically no increase. I
Yeah,
mean,
and in
there's
fact,
actually a decrease for the
Decrease.
majority of them. In terms of the emergency runs, if that number was maybe lower, I see value in the raise, and increasing of it. But if that number was maybe lower, maybe it would be more palatable to those individuals in the community that have had concerns with it, just kind of as a
because
middle ground, if you will.
because yeah, it's also true from my understanding is when you look at who is going to be using the ambulance service the most, well, outside of elderly people who lived on a fixed income, so that is who that would hurt the most. Because
Well-
I got to assume at a certain age bracket, you're more likely to call the ambulance than when you're my age, because
That's where my discussion of the
Yeah.
Medicaid, Medicare came from, though, because most of those people also
Oh,
tend to be on Medicaid or Medicare. I'm not going to say that's universal, but tend to be on one of those two services, and they shouldn't really see an increase, just
No.
based on contractual.
And Bridget wanted me to correct, the ambulance that was in the 90s, we've sold that ambulance, and our oldest is from 2003. So we still have 10 years in our
Oh,
coverage.
okay.
It's not quite,
10 years is still
sorry to,
too many in my opinion.
yes.
Did you get the maintenance cost?
Yes, so as it stands, for this year, as it currently sits, we've already either spent or encumbered $20,000. Our budget for the entire year for vehicle maintenance was $21,000. Last year we spent $10,000 in vehicle maintenance, but the year before that we spent just $17,000. So I think trying to save money and not doing as much maintenance in that year where things were really tight, now we're seeing that we're going to have to
We're making up for it the next year,
pay for
basically.
it now.
And that's no training budget in there at all. Did we have any?
No, we've
training?
got training budget.
How
Yeah.
much was that?
10,000.
Versus ambulance versus police and fire, or are they about?
EMS was the only one who had a training budget this year, if I recall correctly.
Yes. Well, that's not true. For police and fire, what I asked them was that they had to present a budget to me that was flat as it was last year, and if they wanted to incorporate training in that, they had to take it out of somewhere else. So basically, they had the same budget. How they allocated that was up to them.
That's
Does
where,
that answer your question?
yeah, that's where, because of the 522 funds, they're basically outside of salaries are the only department that really saw an increase, as far as the emergency services.
I'm curious, with the 522, if the fire department is helping the ambulance at times, can't they get part of that money too?
No.
It's all ambulance.
And we had discussed at one time fire rates, we'd ask for a very simple structure. Got a huge conglomeration for every glove that was used, and we didn't want to go down that road. Hours, cost per hour for the truck. And so that's something that ended up getting tabled, and I don't think has been explored again, but as an offset for the fire costs.
And there's a countywide sales tax that the fire departments get part of, that even EMS should be able to get part of. It's just an emergency services countywide tax.
Well, but the county hasn't,
They haven't given the EMS, but only
with the
given
exception of our brush rigs and maybe a tanker.
We get some money for fire runs, but it is not substantial.
The
And
county
that's-
could fix our streets too if they wanted to.
Well, they don't get tax dollars. Do they get tax dollars?
Gross production, they can use their gross production dollars on city streets.
And I think that's something else though to consider too, is, when we're looking at other, if you're considering other
I'm not
departments.
asking them to, but they,
What
They
they
could.
yeah.
Is that, we do, fire, for instance, does cover the county at large, and so did EMS, and prior to the 522 fund, there was very little funding coming back in from county residents of any kind to.
As long as we have a plan.
I would like to explore and and study and
The membership?
bringing those down a little bit, because I think that it's not gonna help. I think people are still gonna have issue with it, because I get it. Nobody wants to see an increase, but an increase is inevitable. But can we make that increase more palatable and still accomplish the same goal?
I'd agree, especially looking at how much we have lost to the insurance companies because of unbillable. It'd be nice to have more concrete numbers of what we'll get back and not just in losses. So I'd second that motion to table.
Was that a motion?
Yeah, I motion we table it.
Okay.
I'd second that motion. Okay, thank you.
I have a motion by Mr. Brooks and a second by Mr. Dowling to table action on resolution number 2021-013 and send it back we'll just table it, and then I'm going to have more discussion. So I have, okay. Is there any more discussion? I have more discussion. So do we want that to go back to a different committee for review or back to public safety?
I think it could go back to public safety. That'd be my opinion, but.
We want input from finance committee on that maybe?
Could do that.
I guess Sadie is in.
Sadie's on it.
finance, so that would be super.
Can both look at it?
Hmm?
Can both not look at it, finance and?
You had the struggle of violating open meeting through that.
You can do it as long as you don't meet.
Together, right, but you have to be careful not to share opinion across that line. That makes it, I think that's a dangerous, to do them simultaneously is dangerous. That's my opinion.
Well, I think, just they coach it maybe from a different train of thought than what.
The chairmans could discuss it.
The chairman could discuss.
It's good to bring that information back to each committee.
That,
So we would need an amended motion.
No,
no,
No?
no, we don't need a motion.
that's just an assignment by the mayor.
Okay.
Okay, so is there any further discussion? All right, please call the vote.
Brooks,
Yes.
Dowling,
Yes.
Winters,
Yes.
Stelling,
Yes.
Bowman,
Yes.
Beer,
Yes.
Swallow. Yes. Martin.
Yes.
All right, motion's tabled. It'll go to Parks and Buildings, it'll go to Finance, and the chairman,
Public safety.
huh?
Public safety.
Public Safety. You're correct. It'll go to Public Safety, it'll go to Finance. The chairs of each of those committees can help find the balance.
Angelica will take care of the
Yeah.
schedule.
Yes, we'll work on it.
Number 11, discussion and action on the calendar year 2022 purchasing designations and limits.
This is our annual approval approval of the designations and limits. When we were in that one budget year where things were definitely crunched, we had removed all assistant supervisors from having purchasing limits. The only thing that has changed between this year and last year is we added those assistant supervisors to have their purchasing limits back, so that they can sign off on purchase orders. That's more of a, it's more beneficial in the office. It allows for the assistants to come in and sign purchase orders that are within their limits, whereas it sits right now, the supervisors have to come in and sign everything, and it just works easier when we can have the assistants also have signing authority.
Has it been a pretty big issue finding for the assistant supervisor to find the supervisor?
It's not necessarily a huge issue, Taylor. It just makes it,
Makes
it
life
makes
easier.
the process run more smoothly. Typically, the assistant supervisors are the ones that are handling the paperwork anyway, and so it just speeds the process up. And the ladies, the staff in the office don't have to track somebody down as frequently.
Do you guys not still have a weekly department head meeting?
We have bi-weekly department head meetings.
So, I mean, could those not be approved during that period? I'm just saying, we're still in a tough financial spot.
Well, the spending limit doesn't mean that they can spend it. It just means if they're approved to spend that on whatever the purchase order is for, then they have the authorization based on their spending level to execute that purchase order.
So
They still have to get authorization.
So they're still having to go to you for the purchase order? Because
No,
my
they-
understanding was this let them write a purchase order, and like they had the authorization to spend up to that amount.
You'll probably explain it better. Go ahead.
So, for example, I don't know who I want to use for an example. So, now I'm
Make
ready.
it fictitious.
Okay,
you
so in
don't-
the sanitation department, we have the supervisor and the assistant supervisor. I believe the supervisor's spending authority is $5,000, and then the assistant supervisor's is $2,500. In that, and those may not be, we're using hypotheticals here. It allows for the assistant supervisor to sign off on a purchase order of up to $2,500. One of the changes that we made when I took over as city manager was making the departments responsible for their own budgets. We're still managing those and monitoring those on a monthly basis to ensure that they're staying within their budget. We're asking them to stay within their monthly budget as opposed to having an annual budget. We're asking them to stay within their monthly budget. And so that's still being monitored as well. We haven't changed anything. After we made it through that first really critical period, I was approving every purchase that went through the city at that time. When we made it through that crazy point in time, we moved it back so that the supervisors are responsible for their budgets. Their performance evaluation is dependent on them meeting their budget as well. And so all this is doing is simply allowing the assistant supervisors to come in and take care of things that are up to their purview, up to their appropriate spending level, sign off on those and move forward. If you'd like to change it back, we most definitely can do that. I don't have a problem with that. We're still doing all the same things as far as monitoring it and making sure they're staying within their budget, and we're watching that more closely than we have in the past. So,
I don't think that, to change this, I don't think necessarily gives them a blank check.
It does not.
To do what they want to, we've appointed them to position basically of trust and everything, they need to give responsibility, and it needs, and I think at time too, would help free you up some supervisory of some of that, and I believe, if probably one of them missteps, they'll become out of their budget or misstep, and, that they'll learn.
none of the limits are set to the extent that they would be spending even a significant portion of their budget by approving a purchase order that's within their rights.
And that's why most of these are 5,000 or less.
Yeah. For me, allowing supervisors to sign off and authorize all of theirs, it takes that responsibility off of me. And then in turn, for the supervisors, having the assistants able to authorize up to a certain limit, it frees those supervisors up then in turn, just like it would me to manage things.
Well,
I just have a bad taste in my mouth because
I understand.
we've been down this road and it caused us issues. Now, it was a much higher spending limit with a much different position, but it was,
I understand.
But I think, just from an operating standpoint, if the supervisor's on vacation, the assistant supervisor's gonna have to be able to do it. Or they're on medical leave for however long, or whatever it may be.
Don't they always have access to the city manager, though, if they need to? There's a higher,
I mean, I'd like to say that I'm here every single day and available every single day, but quite frankly, I'm in the meetings and a lot of things. I mean, it can come to me ultimately if it needed to, yes, but it's at your consideration. I
I'll
will
come
enforce
back
it
and
however you,
the amounts are negligible in the grand scheme of things. So I just, bad taste in my mouth.
I
So
understand.
I would motion to approve the calendar year 2022 purchasing designations and limits.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Winters, a second by Mr. Stellings to approve the calendar year 2022 purchasing designations and limits. Is there any further discussion?
I was just going to ask a point of clarification. Does somebody have the ability to make the work order and approve it themselves?
As long as they're authorized to spend that, yes.
Okay.
But they're not,
But that doesn't necessarily mean, I just did not, if I was in that position, I'm like, hey, I'm going to approve this $1,000 expense for this pizza party and then sign that off. If that was, I mean, it'll come back down to the chain of fact that I'll get in trouble,
They
but.
could do
okay.
that, but they would be, I mean, as part of their evaluation, they'd be held responsible
Yeah,
for
and then
that.
the.
Permission
the person-
doesn't always mean authorization and vice versa.
Mhm. So I just was curious about that point part of it, but yeah, okay.
Is there any further discussion? Please call the vote.
Winters,
Yes.
Stelling,
Yes.
Baird,
Yes.
Swallow,
Yes.
Dowling,
Yes.
Bowman,
Yes.
Brooks,
no,
Martin,
Yes.
Okay, item 12 is discussion and action to declare surplus and transfer the 1998 Crown Victoria to the Woods County Sheriff's Office. Angelica.
So this vehicle was originally given to us by the Woods County Sheriff's Office, so we are no longer utilizing it. And so in that agreement, it was asked that it be transferred back to them in order for them to do with it what they choose. I believe they're wanting to auction it or sell it. But that was the original agreement, is they would transfer ownership to us. We would use it for the time frame that we needed it, and then we would give it back when we were done, and that's all that we're doing here.
I would entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to declare surplus and transfer the 1998 Crown Victoria to the Woods County Sheriff's Office.
A second.
Have a motion by Mr. Winters, a second by Mrs. Beer to declare surplus and transfer the 1998 Crown Victoria to the Woods County Sheriff's Office. Is there any further discussion? Please call the vote.
Winters,
Yes.
Baird,
Yes.
Bowman,
Yes.
Brooks,
yes,
Stelling,
Yes.
Swallow,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Dowling,
Yes.
Item 13, new business. Nothing that I'm aware of is going to meet the definition of new business, so we'll move on to 14, remarks and inquiries by council members.
I want to make a comment on the water department, plus there's a lot of other departments that I'm sure help participate. It kind of all came together with the water line leak. Plus, right after it happened, there was one on Noble, so they just basically picked up and moved to another spot, and they spent a lot of hours without sleep and working hard diligently to try to do their jobs and stuff. So they're dedicated. They did a great job of it.
Yeah, they did. Long hours, cold weather, cold water.
like I said, kind of called water department out, but I'm sure there's other departments that kicked in and.
Which
you know,
county
some-
district one?
Yes, I was just getting ready to say, the county just,
Street
District
department.
1 and the street department. County, we can't be thankful enough for them. You know, we don't have the scope or size of equipment that they have and the operators that they have. We would not have been able to isolate the leak. You know, because of their assistance, that repair cost us substantially less than what we anticipated.
It was 17,
It was $17,100.
which is, yeah, no, yeah.
I think we were estimating a minimum of like 50, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, county does not get enough credit a lot of times for what they do to help us. And they pitch in a lot of things.
Any other remarks? Okay, we'll adjourn the council meeting and open the utility authority meeting. Please call the roll. Joe, thank you.
Winters,
Here?
Dowling,
Here.
Swallow. Here. Martin,
Here.
Bowman,
Here.
Stelling,
Here.
Bear,
Here.
Brooks.
Here.
All right, item 3 is discussion and action on the consent agenda. All of the following items which concern reports and items of a routine nature normally approved at AUA meetings will be approved by one vote of the authority. Any trustee desiring to discuss an item on the consent agenda may request that the item be removed from the consent agenda and placed for discussion as the next item on the regular agenda. It will then be considered separately. The consent agenda consists of the consideration and action on the following items. Item A, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of November 15, 2021, and approval of claims in the amount of $124,402.55 and payroll expenses of $76,341.72. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
A motion to approve the consent agenda?
A second.
I have a motion by Mr. Winters and a second by Mrs. Beard to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Please call the vote.
Winters,
Yes.
Bear,
Yes.
Stelling,
Yes.
Swallow,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Bowman,
Yes.
Brooks,
Yes.
Dowling,
Yes.
Item 5 is discussion and action to approve change order number 2 to increase the water well number 46 replacement project by $6,500. Go ahead.
So this is the water well that we are rehabbing down the well field. That's one that we received REAP grant funding to do. And when the engineer originally designed this, they felt like the 230 volt pump and panel would be appropriate. Or I guess that is still appropriate, I apologize. The pump and panel that we need for the well itself requires a higher level of electrical service, and so we had to have a new transformer and 480 volt panel blocks put in. Just one of the things that the engineer didn't catch, and so it just is, we have to update it so that once the well is rehabbed, that we're able to operate it with our electrical system. So the additional cost is going to be $6,500 to do that.
So it was something that was neat, because this says it was just to make it for continuity and interchangeable parts. It was in fact needed, or was that more accurate?
My understanding that it was not going to be able to function without the new parts. So that is probably what was put on the change order. But in talking to Hoffman and Eubank and the assistant water superintendent, we would not have been able to operate it without changing these parts out. No, if it was just because it looked nice, then no, that wouldn't be appropriate.
So is this on a rehab well?
Yes, the well in the well field that we're rehabbing, yes.
Okay. Somewhere down the line, I guess. What happened to the new well? I mean, I haven't heard an update on, so that's different.
This is the offset well that
Oh,
I guess
so it is a
rehabbing
new well.
is not appropriate.
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
the
I was thinking
offset
just-
well that we've called it a variety of different project
Okay.
names, and so yes, it is the offset well. I apologize, Randy.
I'd make a motion to approve change order number 2 to increase the water well number 46 replacement project by $6,500.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Winters and a second by Mr. Stelling to Approve change order number 2, increase the water well number 46 replacement project by $6,500. Is there any further discussion? Please call the vote.
Winters,
Yes.
Stelling,
Yes.
Dowling,
Yes.
Bear,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Swallow. Yes. Bowman,
Yes.
Brooks.
Yes.
Item number 6 is discussion and action to approve change order number 1 to extend the water main extension to Alva High School, completion date 2, January 27, 2022, to accommodate scheduling. Angelica talked about this briefly. Is there anything?
No, I'd like to go ahead and approve this because we're past the end of the date needed, but based on what Drake had told me earlier, we may have to extend it again. We may not. They may come in and everything may function appropriately. Originally, it was believed that line was a 6-inch water line. It's an 8-inch water line that we're connecting to, and so that just changed the scope of things. And where we're able to connect into that water line was not one of those things where we think we know where everything is in our water drawings and diagrams. However, sometimes when you dig things up, they're a little bit different than what you thought they were, and so we're having to move where we tap into that line at. And the line itself is a different size than what we believed it to be. And so those two things combined. So far, we haven't seen any additional changes or aren't seeing any additional changes in cost, but it may delay us a little bit. We have to change some equipment out to be able to do that.
Assuming that, to connect the two is a different piece, do we have that coupling piece?
I don't know
already in, or
the
are we
answer to
waiting?
that. I don't know the answer to that question. Right now, we were more concerned with being able to tap into the line. We had to have a different size saddle tap because the line was obviously a different size, and so they were looking at what all of that was going to change. And so this was this afternoon that he came and visited with me, and so that being said, yeah. That being said, I don't really know what the long term.
We're going to bring that to the rest of our meetings.
It's my ginger beer, sorry. It's my diabetes thing.
So we have to, there may be additional adjustments is what I'm saying, Daniel.
Okay.
But at this point in time, I feel like we need to go ahead and approve the change order for extending the time. We may or may not be done within that time frame. We may have to extend it again. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
This doesn't have necessarily the action of it, but not the extending of the date. If I'm right, I think I ran into the guy from Meyer Sharing. He was inspecting the pipe equipment over this weekend and stuff like that.
Very possible.
It looks like they were mapping out that in front of the residential's homes along this road right here. So it's going to have to go in those people's front yard?
It'll be bored underneath.
Okay, so it won't necessarily affect the property. Okay, that's what I was curious about.
We're not digging up their
Yeah.
yards or anything.
Yeah, give them notice or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve change order number 1 to extend the water main extension to Alva High School, completion date to January 27th, 2022 to accommodate schedule.
Second.
Good.
Have a motion by Mr. Bowman, a second by Mrs. Beer to approve change order number 1 to extend the water main extension to Alva High School, completion date to January 27, 2022 to accommodate scheduling. Is there any further discussion? Please call the vote.
Bowman,
Yes.
Bear,
Yes.
Swallow,
Yes.
Dowling,
Yes.
Stilling,
Yes.
Brooks,
Yes.
Winters,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
All right, we're adjourned to the Utility Authority, and we'll open the Alva Economic Development Authority meeting. When you're ready, please call the roll.
Winters,
Here.
Dowling,
Here.
Swallow,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
Bowman,
Here.
Stelling,
Here.
Bear,
Here.
Brooks.
Here.
Item 3 is discussion and action on the consent agenda. All of the following items, which concern reports and items of a routine nature normally approved at AEDA meetings, will be approved by one vote of the authority. Any trustee desiring to discuss an item on the consent agenda may request that it be removed from the consent agenda and placed for discussion as the next item on the regular agenda. It will then be considered separately. The consent agenda consists of the consideration and action on the following items. Item A, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of November 15th, 2021, and item B, approval of claims in the amount of $17,637.87 and payroll expenses of $19,645.55. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
A motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Winters and a second by Mr. Bowen to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Please call the vote.
Winters,
Yes.
Bowman,
Yes.
Bear,
Yes.
Swallow, Dowling,
Yes.
Stelling,
Yes.
Brooks,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.